Hello and welcome back to the Primal Pursuits podcast. We're your hosts, Mike and Canyon Merrill, and today we are excited to have Mr. Russell Anderson on as a guest. Russ is the owner and founder of the World Strength Games, as well as No Blocks Energy Chews, and also he and his wife Abby recently started US Med Spa, where you can have all of your stem cell needs met. We think you'll love this one. Please give us some feedback, rating, and review, and we'll talk to you here on the next one.
So Russ Anderson, will you introduce yourself a little bit for the audience?
So I've known Mike since high school. Mike and I both played for Spanish Fork, the baseball team down there, which Spanish Fork was probably most famous for, right? That and rodeo and maybe wrestling. I think a lot of who I am, Mike would probably back this, a lot of who I am is based on that, and that mindset, I think, helps you withstand trials and adversity and challenges, being a competitor, right? We live in a non-competitive world. So I've been a competitor and needed a place to put that, or, park that competitiveness as a married man and husband. And I got into powerlifting back in 2002, right after I went through a divorce, and needed something that I could succeed at. And so I had a coach, I had a mentor, had a proven path, did everything they said. Couldn't walk a lot of times, but it didn't really matter because I was in my fortress of solitude. I would basically eat and train and stay in my house and watch and take care of my little girls. I got into powerlifting. So powerlifting is squat, deadlift, and bench press. And you can compete individually in those three events. But what they do is they add all three up, and then that's your score, right? So
Okay.
It's good. Squat and deadlift are probably the two best exercise for human beings. Bench press, probably one of the worst. Again, that's another rabbit hole we won't go down. Bench press is actually a dysfunctional World War II exercise, supposedly made for the chest, and it's the quickest way to hurt your chest or permanently hurt your chest, right? And I'm blessed or lucky enough to not have had an injury with bench press, but I bench pressed 550 pounds. That's the best I ever did. Raw with
Wow.
which means no support. In Spanish Fork, I bench pressed 500 pounds. So kind of proud to be I'll probably never do that again. So that's a pretty cool thing. And I squatted 650 pounds and deadlifted 665 pounds and did that all around 200 pounds body weight.
Wow.
And actually had such a good coach and such, good mentors that I placed second place at the World Championships in Reno in 2004. The gentleman that I lost to, the gold medalist, was an 18-time world champion. By the time his career was over, 18 times, like just totally dominated it. So there was no shame in the silver medals, taking second place to Evandro Casagrande from Brazil.
Wow.
Anyway,
Wow.
right after I got done with the World Championships in 2004, I met Travis Ortmeyer, who's a, world famous strongman, been seen all over the world. He's a household name in Europe, not necessarily in the United States, but in Europe, he's a household name. And he said to me, when you're ready to take off, quote, your little skirt, come and do strongman. So,
Nice.
that kind of disarmed me, knocked me off my perch a little bit. I thought I was pretty cool. But I'd seen that strongman stuff on TV, Canyon and Mike, and just like you had.
Yeah.
I wanted to know if I could pick up any of those big round cement Atlas stones or flip 1,000-pound tires and stuff like that. And so instead of backing away, which is probably my first, instinct, is that don't do this. This might be a bad idea. Because at the time he lived in Houston, where it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity in the summertime. That's what it was. But I'm not big into backing down on challenges, which is both a blessing and a curse. So I accepted it. I got a room at I guess it was the Marriott right off the freeway, and flew down there, accepted his challenge. I took a powerlifting friend, and by the time we were done with 2 days of training with Travis Ortmeyer down in Houston with 100 degrees and 100% humidity, I had diarrhea, like uncontrollable diarrhea. I had to buy Imodium and stuff like that. It was just central nervous system shock. And the guy that I brought down there, honestly, he had full-on central nervous system shock from the training. And we thought we were tough power lifters, right?
Wow.
We got absolutely exposed and humiliated, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, it went the opposite direction where I embraced it. I guess, Mike, it would be like upgrading from a tiny white-tailed deer to a giant elk or something like that, right? So I said, hey man, this one's for me. I got to do this. And so I began my slow collection of strongman equipment, which you can't buy, on Amazon. So you have to
Right.
contact local welders and take them like sketchy diagrams and have them build you stuff. And it either turns out the way you want it, or sometimes a little bit better, or many times nothing like you wanted it, but you have to make it functional. So had to have the farmer's walk build, which is the apparatus that you carry in your hands. And it is what it says it is. It's like the old farms where they had to carry milk jugs, and everybody wanted to know how far you could carry the milk jug from barn to barn or place to place. And then it was farm against farm and farmer against farmer. And the farmer's walk is now a standardized event found in almost every strongman show from coast to coast around the world. And at World's Strongest Man, Farmer's Walk's been there for, 40 years. Had to have those implements built, and then had a yoke built, a big steel yoke, which is like a big square cage. It almost looks like a squat rack, but it has posts on it so you can load it up. So it usually starts right around 200 pounds, and you can load those things up to 1,000 pounds. We're carrying 1,000 pounds on your back. I've done that.
Wow.
And you actually have auditory and visual hallucinations that you have to ignore. So it's probably kind of like a pilot where they say, hey, these little UFO things are going to be coming up on you. Just totally ignore them, pay no attention to them, and keep walking. And that happens over and over again, where all this crazy stuff happens. It distorts sound. If somebody's there training with you, they're like, hey, come on, you got this. And it's almost like a movie with sound effects, right? There actually was a time where I was over in Mapleton, which was another place that I trained with Kevin Ferris, who's a World's Strongest Man finalist and competitor right now, and Van Hatfield, was a former America's Strongest Man. I would train with those guys, and they didn't have a romper room, lightweight thought in their mind. So if you went over there as a 220-pound guy, you had to train with the 320-pound guys, right? So every
Wow.
time I would go over there, almost every time, I would leave bleeding and or having thrown up or lost bowel control or all three. And I know that's not pleasant on a podcast. I know it's a family show. Yeah, but sometimes all three. In fact, there was a time I was training over there where we did deadlift, and it ended with 550 pounds for 5 reps, right? 550 for 5. And I mean, that was
crazy.
That was 100 pounds less than my max that we were doing for 5, right? And so I left there. I drove a Honda Civic, and I made it from Mapleton to the freeway right on the on-ramp, where I had to pull over and put my hazard lights on. My back was like frozen, right? So I got out and I thought, well, I don't want to lay in the back of the car, but I got to lay down. So I got in front of the car with the hazards on, laid down in the emergency lane with all the broken yellow reflectors and gravel and all that stuff. And sure enough, a highway patrolman pulls in front of me as I'm laying on the ground. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy's going to think I'm on crack, right? He's gonna cuff me and throw me in the back right now. So he comes over and he's just asking me, trying to be cool. He's like, is everything okay? And I said, I just got done deadlifting with Van Hatfield. And he's like, you know Van Hatfield? So the word got out. This guy helped me get back into my car. He goes, you think you can drive home? Do I need to call you somebody? And I told him it's rough, but I had to drive back to Sandy again at that time from Mapleton with my back arced and my seatbelt on with my face right next to the windshield because of deadlifts at 550 for reps. So that's my story that I've told a few times. I hope it's consistent with the last few times I've told it. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. And then I trained for a competition, and it was trial by fire. My first competition was the Lone Star Classic, which more or less at the time was Texas Strongest Man. And that would draw the best athletes, not just from Texas, which is probably the best strongman state, or at least was at the time, but from around the country. Everybody wanted to test their mettle against, better competition, which is wise, right? So in my class, which was a 105 kilo class, there were 26 athletes from around the country and around the world that were there to test themselves against the best. That was my first show in 2008. And the big tough thing there in my class was they didn't go easy on us. They had a fire truck, a, a regular fire truck that had 11 firefighters on it. They promised they wouldn't put water on it. They lied. They filled it full of water. The tires were slightly flat. So it
Wow.
ended up weighing more than the 18-wheeler that they pulled that year at World's Strongest Man with the big guys. And the first 10 guys in front of me all got an F, all got a 0. And so more or less,
Wow.
at least from online, everybody knows each other, right? And so people start complaining, right? Somebody said to me,
Yeah.
Russ, you can't even move it. At 10 feet, it just stops. So I'm listening to what they're saying, but inside of my head, I'm like, you know what? If everybody's stopping at 10 feet and basically getting a 0, I'm going to go 11 feet and pull it for 1 foot, and then I'll be the leader, right? So I started pulling it. I got a little bit more momentum than the guys ahead of me. I learned something from it. Like watching everybody strike out, Mike, right? Right. This guy's throwing it high and inside, right? And everybody's going for it. I have to learn something from it. I get to that 10-foot spot that was stopping everybody, and I just went bonkers right there. Turned out that was the place where there was no leverage, right? And I felt this pop, 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 and I just kind of ignored it at the time. I got past that, 11-foot area, and the fire truck started going like crazy, and then it picked up momentum, and I finished it in 32.28 seconds.
Wow.
That video is easy to find. All you have to Google is Russ Anderson Strongman, just 3 words, Russ Anderson Strongman, or Russ Anderson fire truck, and that'll come right up. It was basically 30 tons, but here's the big part, and it has nothing to do with me. After I showed that it could be done, Canyon and Mike, everybody finished it. There wasn't an athlete out of those 26 in my class that failed. Everybody saw that you had to get past that tough point, right? So that's kind of like the Roger Bannister 4-minute mile, can't be done, the human heart will explode, all this stuff.
Yeah.
You're athletes. There's a lot of mental blocks. This guy throws 105 miles per hour, you can't hit it, right? There's a 4-minute mile, there's no way you can break that. A lot of that stuff is nonsense. A lot of that human limit stuff is nonsense. There are millions of witnesses around the world that have witnessed a woman or a slightly built man lift a car off family members. And when they interview them, they're usually really damaged after that, but they get that big adrenaline and dopamine dump, right? And they literally pick up the car so their family member that's pinned under this burning or broken car can move out of there. A lot of elite athletes can go to that 6th gear, go to that 6th place, because they don't care whether they pass out. We can push harder than we think we can. And a lot of these competitions and a lot of these sports are won in practice. They're not won in the competitions. They're won in the practice. That's kind of my genesis. I started as a power lifter. Now we run what's called the World Strength Games. So in 2017, we invited 11 world-class athletes from mostly North America, Canada, and the U.S. to come to St. George, Utah, where it's warm in the wintertime, or at least relatively warm in the wintertime. And our whole goal there was to have a run at some world records, right? We'd have winners and some weight classes, but we were there to try to break these world records, kind of low-hanging fruit, if you will, records we thought we would have a chance at. And we actually broke 17 world records, set or broke 17 world records in 1 year in 2017. And then it started to grow. In 2018, we had athletes from all over the world. And then in 2019, same thing, got bigger and bigger. And then in 2020 and 2021, we had to shut it down because they told us if we ran the World Strength Games in St. George that we'd be liable for all the COVID stuff. And we know all the hysterics and nonsense about that, but retrospect's 2020, right? So we have momentum again in 2023. For the first time, we moved it out of St. George to Orlando, Florida, where we had a billionaire that told us we'd have, $180,000 to put on the games at the Orlando Convention Center. And so we did that, and we actually broke the American deadlift record, which was 1,025. We actually own the American deadlift record as a St. George, Utah organization. Dimitar Savatinov, who's a naturalized American, he pulled 1,031 pounds at our show last year in Orlando. And then we moved it again this year and had kind of a short change. We moved it to St. George, where you two guys attended. And we had over 80 athletes from 30 countries, and we broke 19 set or broke 19 world records. And so we finally after COVID, we finally have some momentum. We're up and running again. And we have 90 athletes registered and coming for sure. And then we have what are called worldwide qualifiers. The British Strength Games, the Brazilian Strength Games, the Argentine Strength Games, the Texas Strength Games, and so on and so forth. Even the Utah Strength Games, where the top 3 athletes in every single weight class will earn the right, or get their dance card to go to the World Strength Games in St. George, May 23 and 24 of 2025. So a little bit less than a year away.
So Russ, as an athlete, as a father, as an entrepreneur, what are your keys to success? I mean, what drive you, and you've been successful at all 3 in different ways, and a lot of them concurrently. What is it that drives you? What's that primal part of you that really knows how to dig in and get things done?
So I grew up in Salem and Spanish Fork like you did, Mike. And so every summer I bucked bales. I hauled hay, right? And that's what Spanish Fork and Salem were at the time. Farmers with big fields with a need to get that hay put in barns. And I didn't come from rich parents. I came from school teacher parents. My parents both taught school in Payson, Utah. And they had, part of their summers off. But to answer your question, Mike, I grew up working hard. And then we'd play baseball under the lights after working all day, right? That's just how it was. And you couldn't complain because that was the same thing for all your friends that were there. They were all broke, poor, Lakeshore, Palmyra, Benjamin, Spanish Fork, broke kids too. And they had the same stupid sunburn that I had from working all day, right? But
farmer's tan.
Yeah, farmer's tan. Yeah. Well, long before I knew about farmer's walk, I knew I could carry 2 wet bales, probably about 50 feet, and then not be able to lift them up on the truck, right? I was a skinny baseball dork, right? I think my failures, and I've had many of those. I'm not going to talk about all of those on the podcast, but man, I mentioned I had a divorce, I think the inclination is to say my wife was a blank, right? Or my husband was this or that or the other. I did plenty of things to undermine my first marriage. And I've failed at jobs. I was a failed baseball player. The fact is I wasn't good enough. There you go. That's what every baseball player that needs to stop playing at some point needs to say. I'm not good enough. If you were, then somebody would be happy to take you aboard, right? I wasn't good enough. So failures, a lot of failures. And that's been one of the big things, Mike. I failed in powerlifting my first meet in powerlifting. I went and there's 4 athletes. I took 4th place. You can't go lower. But the big thing, Mike, has been risk taking. You can't just take crazy gambles, but you have to take calculated risks. And there's some point in all of those calculated risks where you don't know whether it's going to make it or not. And in your heart of hearts, you know that you don't know whether it's going to make it or not. You've done everything that you've been mentored and coached to do. You've done things that other entrepreneurs or athletes have done, but you really don't know whether it's going to take or not. And that's kind of where you fall back on your faith and your support system, your family, right? And get up and keep trying again. With the World Strength Games, with the good grief with the COVID stuff, that was devastating, to have that just stripped away. And everybody was afraid, and there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation and rumor and hyperbole and all that stuff. You just gotta keep getting up and dusting yourself off and trying again. It's kind of like a rodeo. With US Med Spa, we actually learned a lot from the mistakes of other people. So US Med Spa, we offer stem cells, and you do not have to go to Latin America for them, because from the very beginning, they're FDA compliant. So a little over 4 years ago, the company that we sourced those from said to the FDA, what do we need to do to offer stem cells here in the United States so people don't have to go to Latin America, Panama or Colombia or Mexico or things like that? And they gave them a laundry list of things that needed to be done that scared everybody else away. It was unrealistic. It was a 4-minute mile, more or less. But one of the contacts that I work with, he actually did it. He'd call the FDA in and say, we have to do this and this and this under these conditions, and did all of that stuff. And then contacted us about a year ago and said, we did it. We have FDA compliant adipose derived stem cells that can be that can be administered right here in the United States, so long as we keep the protocol, say what they ask us to say, do what they ask us to do, and disclaim it the way they want it disclaimed. And we've learned from the mistakes of others. And I guess for a lot of people, I guess for CPI down in Mexico and also Dr. Reardon down in Panama, they're doing just fine without having to be in the United States, because they've become what's called medical tourism. So people from all over the world will fly down to Panama or fly down to Mexico and go to a Padres game in San Diego and then go get more treatments the next day. And both of those companies are legit. Dr. Reardon down in Panama, Mel Gibson's doctor who treated Mel and his dad, extended his dad's life. They administer stem cells that have not been frozen. So with the afterbirth cells, it's better that they're never frozen. And so both of those operations are legitimate and probably choose not to be in the United States. But for the time being, we offer the strongest, best, fastest working stem cells of all, even more than those two locations right here in the United States. It's just that people don't know about us. But that's changing.
Right. Well, so Canyon, and I know this because we were down there at the World Strength Games in St. George at, with Primal Performance Supplements. We were the primary protein sponsor of the event, and we love supporting World Strength Games and plan to continue to support events that you guys have around. But you made an announcement that Magnus Ver Magnusson, who you can tell us a little bit about, was getting a treatment down there in front of the press and some other people from US Med Spa. You had a doctor fly in to help him with that. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how? I saw a post he made about that recently. Sounds like the results have been incredible. It's only been a few months. What can you share about his experience with US Med Spa and the stem cells that you guys offer?
2 days ago, we got a video endorsement from 4-time World's Strongest Man, Magnus Ver Magnusson. That's a household name for many Americans. In Europe, he's literally like a god. I say that with the lowercase g, not taking the Lord's name in vain. But Magnus Ver Magnusson, 4-time World's Strongest Man, and he did it old school style against the toughest, strongest guys of all. They weren't in arenas. Many times it was in Iceland. Highlighted by having to carry the 410-pound Husafell stone in the town of Husafell. Magnus, 4-time World's Strongest Man, who's now 62. He can get his stem cells anywhere in the world that he wants. And if he pushed just a little bit, I'm sure he could get them for free. That wouldn't be a problem. Because on the business side, anybody would be happy to say, look, we treated Magnus Ver Magnusson, 4-time World's Strongest Man. You're going to get customers or / patients from treating somebody like that just because of who they are. And they've earned that, right? So Magnus is now 62. He was one of our judges, and he will be again next year. We're actually really good friends. I don't know that he feels the same way. I hope so. But we treated Magnus last year in April when Mike and Canyon were down in St. George. We treated him and 8-time World's Strongest Man finalist Travis Ortmeyer. We treated them simultaneously, back to back. There's no HIPAA violation here because both of them have told us that we could make it completely public. But now, to answer your question again, Mike, it's been over 3 months, and both gentlemen are healing like crazy, and it's not a coincidence. There's nothing. So Magnus has already had both knees replaced. He did that before we even knew him personally. So he had both knees replaced. He's 62, and he's put more miles, per se, on his body than anybody that I know of. And it just wasn't it wasn't in the cards for us to treat his knees. And by the way, when it's bone on bone, there's not a lot they can do right now because that's like getting something from nothing. You can't do that. But yeah. Magnus still had shoulder injuries and core injuries and lower back injuries, and his wrists hurt, and he had constant tendonitis and things like that, right? So anytime he would train, and it's a far cry from what he used to train with, he would be sore for a day or two, which makes it tough as you age, right? So inflammation was a problem. He's now not having inflammation. The stem cells that we got him took down the inflammation, which is good enough for him, but it's better than that. All of his joints feel better. His replaced knees, they still have scar tissue and areas around them that have hurt in the past. They're not swollen. He's doing really, really great. And he's training with more at 62 than he's trained at for years. And then Travis, the other gentleman that was trained treated with him. At 42 years old, he is making a comeback to World's Strongest Man. And he's going to make it because he's already over 800 pounds for reps on the deadlift. And he can carry 350, 375 pounds per hand. And he had his hip replaced. So his hip was replaced. I mean, who comes back from that? Nobody. So he's looking at getting back to World's Strongest Man at 42 years old with a hip replacement, but having gotten adipose-derived stem cells, his shoulders don't hurt, his hands don't hurt, his ankles don't hurt, his legs don't hurt. He got an infection in his leg a few years ago. They almost had to amputate his leg. He got to keep his leg, but he had constant pain and couldn't squat heavy because one leg worked and the other leg didn't. Well, that leg, all these years later, is feeling better, and he's squatting heavy and deadlifting heavy, and it would be foolish to bet against Travis, who's also come back to World's Strongest Man, late in his 30s, but now he's going to attempt to do something nobody's done, and that is to come back to the sport at age 42.
Yeah, and Canyon and I got to meet Travis, and he is a beast. I mean, he is just a mountain of a man, and yeah, I would hate to have to compete against him.
And where's that trademark cowboy hat, right?
Yeah.
So
what would you say? Go ahead.
I hope I'm able to answer your questions. I sometimes, I'll sometimes take the bait and go down the rabbit hole, but there's a lot to talk about. I'm excited about it. Obviously, I'm fully caffeinated, just like I'm sure you guys are. And
Apex,
there's just a lot to talk about. So we have two patients that we treated down in St. George 2 days ago, who are LDS temple workers, that have a hard time kneeling and getting up and all these things. And we're super excited to help them. They aren't world-class athletes, but we're super excited to help them. And that's the big thing about what we do. It's fun to bring in these athletes and rub shoulders with these icons, but it's the people that, that don't garner headlines. They get to go back to their lives and hang out with their grandkids and maybe hike and hunt and fish and do things like that into their 70s, 80s, and 90s. That's the real excitement. And we have a bunch of patients. We helped a 23-year-old young lady overcome migraines that dogged her for years. And Big Pharma had nothing for her. It would just medicate her. And so in essence, they'd turn off the alarm while the fire still raged. We got at the root problem and helped her brain actually grow new blood vessels, right? And recircuit and reroute all of that, because our bodies innately know what they need. They just never get the resources to do it. We provide the resources for your body, Mike, and yours, Canyon, at some point to fix itself without surgery. I think one day we'll look back and say, remember when we used to operate on people for everything, for profit? Remember that? Hopefully we say that one day. They used to drill holes in people's heads to let the spirits out, okay? We know how stupid that is now. Trephinine, right? They used to actually drill a hole in people's heads to let the evil spirits out. They used to do bloodletting, where, hey, let's cut this guy's arm open and let it bleed a little bit, and maybe he'll feel better. He wasn't feeling better. He was semi-conscious, right? So I think one day we'll look back at all of these so-called big pharma solutions, and we'll say maybe that wasn't so wise to operate on people. Did you know that surgery is the number 4 leading cause of death in the United States? Oftentimes people that go in for minor surgeries get staph infections, MRSA infections, lose a leg, lose an arm, or never come out of the hospital at all. It's scary, scary stuff. Regenerative medicine, not just us, but peptides and senolytics and all of these things, it's all starting to come together. In fact, we're going to be able to seriously combat aging, which we view as a real disease. The aging process is a disease process. If it were a tree, right, they'd either cut the tree down and chop it up because it's dying, or they'd have to treat it pretty quickly. But we now can lengthen telomeres on genes, extending life. We can get rid of what are called zombie cells. They're actually senescent cells that they stop doubling, they stop dividing, but they bounce around the body and they corrupt other cells and they lead to heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, early aging, all that stuff. We can get rid of those zombie cells, those senescent cells, which all by itself lengthens your lifespan and health span. And then with these adipose-derived stem cells, we can help your body grow new blood vessels. New blood vessels mean more oxygen and nutrients to working muscles in your brain and other things. Recently, I found out my dad was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So that's a pretty grim thing when you get the news that your dad's, if you live long enough to have Alzheimer's, that's a good thing, but nobody wants to go down that way, right? So we work with a doctor that you might have met, Canyon and Mike at WSG, Dr. Greg Smith. He's actually a really, really famous doctor who actually did 2 big movies on Netflix, American Addict 1 and 2, Greg Smith.
Wow.
He's actually going to be treating my father. And the studies on Alzheimer's and ADSCs, or Alzheimer's and basically any stem cells, are all rats and mice or rodents or things like that. Greg's actually treating patients with Alzheimer's, with Parkinson's, even with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and he's helping them lengthen their lives and slow down the disease process, because something's going to get us at some point anyway. The whole thought is, can we extend lifespan, and can we extend the health span so your life's enjoyable? You're not just sitting there like a vegetable at 93, but you're able to get around and do it with less pain, and then also retain muscle. So we can help with all of these things now, and Big Pharma doesn't have an answer for you except cover up problems. And again, I'm not going to go all anti-pharma, but I'm going to tell you there's a big oak tree that says that they have solutions, and we raise an eyebrow to that. And then we're the little sapling next to it, which is regenerative medicine, which we believe is the future. Just like AI, we already know it's the future. We say, is it going to be some sort of Orwellian nightmare? I guess you could say that all this stem cell stuff and all these senolytics and telomere lengthening, that the elites may want to reserve it for themselves so they can extend their lives forever, right?
Yeah.
We're of the belief that this is for everybody. It's not just for the elites. And our stem cells actually are better, and our patients get more of them, and they last longer, and they're actually getting less expensive all the time. So it's a very, very powerful thing that's getting better and getting cheaper. That's called Moore's Law, where technology improves and gets cheaper so the masses can use it. Remember, Mike, when we were kids, and VCRs, people that know what VCRs were $1,000, and then they were 500, then 250, then 100. Same with DVD players. People don't even know what a DVD player is anymore, right? But things get better and cheaper so long as they're allowed to exist. So again, we're doing everything that the FDA has asked us to do, which means we get to stay in the swimming pool longer. Nobody's peed in the pool. Nobody's made any false claims. And we have a slew of patients with positive outcomes up here in northern Utah and also now in southern Utah. And we have athletes that we've treated from all over the world who are getting better and feeling better. And I hope that answers your question, Mike.
How do stem cells work in the individual? The stem cells are like the fountain of youth, essentially. What's the mechanism of action?
Kenyon, I guess the best way to think of it is that it's right there in the word stem, right? And so stem cells can differentiate into almost any type of cell. And I say almost because neurons are tough. Brain cells are tough, right?
Yeah.
But under the right circumstances, we can even include neurons. In fact, I told you a little bit earlier about Dr. Greg Smith, the guy who did the 2 big documentaries, American Addict 1 and 2. We work with him. He's our friend. He's also a WSG World Strength Games partner, right? He was so excited to be there and meet Magnus Ver Magnuson and Travis. He knew exactly who they were. He was hanging over the ped railing there over in the trees, and I was talking to him between events. But he literally treats patients intrathecally, which means he puts it in their spine so it can cross the blood-brain barrier and get to their brain, where if it was just running through their system, it wouldn't happen. And so now, to answer your question, Canyon, we can treat any type of patient. It doesn't mean we'll treat them successfully, because a big part of it is the responsible part, and that's to say we don't know. The first thing that happens is almost a sense of malaise where you kind of feel sick and tired. That's super common. I would say 90% of our patients, and we have a lot of patients now, they kind of feel sick and they call us and text us, hey, is this normal? Did I get a bad batch or whatever it is? That's not the case. The case is, there's a new sheriff in town with a big star belt buckle, right? And the old stem cells are benched and the new ones are in the game. And what happens when the new ones are in the game is our T cells and our macrophages, the immune system, the autoimmune system, all that stuff gets a boost. Because even if you get a site-specific treatment in your knee or in your shoulder, there's still enough residual stem cells that get into your bloodstream, but go to your lungs and go to your liver and go to other parts of your body where you get benefits from that you didn't even expect. So usually side effects are a bad surprise, right? Oh no, side effects, right? If I can say so, the side effects with these adipose-derived stem cells are often positive and beneficial. For example, we have a patient that had chronic ulcers so bad that they were worried about him dying because they would bleed. And so we treated this guy for ulcers. Within a month and a half, he was off of all of his ulcer medication, which his wife and his friends were worried about. He's still off of it, by the way, and it's been 6 months. He had arthritis in his left hand that he didn't even tell us about. So when we interviewed him, he said, my ulcers are gone, my ulcer medication, I'm not taking it. And I had arthritis in my left hand that's either gone or at least not affecting me. My body's not attacking itself anymore. And so that's the big thing, Canyon, is stem cells they can differentiate. That's what it's called. They can differentiate into what they need to become, but once they've done that, that's what they are. So they can grow new bone, new cartilage, new blood vessels, even new neurons under the right conditions, right? But that's what they become. But the other thing that these adipose-derived stem cells do is they set up what are called progenitor cells. And you can think of progenitor cells as like a stem cell factory. Now, when I say they, researchers, they, right? They think these progenitor cells are permanent. They remain in our bodies forever. And so they kick out new stem cells, and then they also help our bodies create what are called exosomes. Exosomes. And exosomes are also in their own right. They're not alive like stem cells. They're much smaller than stem cells are, but they have massive anti-inflammatory effects and even have hypertrophy effects where they help us with lean muscle mass and other things, which is never a bad thing, right? Unless you're totally opposed to being masculine or having muscle mass. Yeah. Again, I say it all the time. They're now calling muscle the longevity organ.
Yep.
So the more muscle you have, man or woman or what have you, the longer you live, because the way it usually goes down for all of us is we have an injury like a hip injury or a femur injury when we're in our 60s, 70s, or 80s. We go into the hospital, they put us in a bed, and then it starts. The cascade effect starts. We get pneumonia in the hospital, and you don't want the pneumonia from the hospital because it's already been bombarded or hatched around antibiotics, so it's usually resistive, and like the pneumococcal pneumonia, right? That is what ends up killing a whole bunch of us. We go to the hospital for that broken bone. It's slow to heal. We get pneumonia, and that's it. That's the end of the game, right? So we're disruptors. I guess it's fair to say that we're disruptors because they have to make room for us, because what we're talking about and what we offer actually works at such a degree that we still get more referrals than we do Google ad patients.
So would you say that the ceiling for stem cells mainly right now is, one, just general awareness, and two, the cost of it, or why don't more people do it?
A lot of people still think that they come from aborted babies. Okay. So at one point that was the case. In fact, I don't know that George W. Bush, I don't know that he did anything of consequence, but he did outlaw the use of embryonic stem cells. So I was in Los Angeles. I was in LA during the Santa Anas in the wintertime. I was hoping it would be warm, but the Santa Anas were blowing. It was like 48 degrees, so it was freezing in Los Angeles. And I was speaking with Robert Kennedy Jr. I spoke first, kind of one of the warm-up guys. I was talking about, you guessed it, stem cells and exosomes. I get up and speak, did my thing, and then as soon as I get off the stage and kind of walk off to the left, a couple came up to me and said, we need to talk to you right away. So my first thing was like, oh no, what did I say? Because I joke around probably more than I should. So I was like, oh no, I said something that offended them. And I'm racing through my thoughts. What did I say that offended them? Because they want to talk to me right now. And then the guy says, we want to talk to you outside where the Santa Anas were blowing, right? So they put their coats on. People in Los Angeles have coats for the winter time, which is kind of funny to me. Yeah. So I walked out in my shirt and my tie, and they came out in their jackets or coats, and the wind's blowing, and they go, we really need to talk to you about our son. And I'm like letting my guard down a little bit now. They don't want to yell at me, because they want to talk about stem cells. They had a severely autistic, nonverbal son that nobody could help. No system or program could help, and they were beside themselves. They were flummoxed, right? So they were told that they could fly to Ukraine, to Kiev, where they could be treated by a doctor who was treating hundreds of people successfully for autism, all up and down the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And they went over there and they treated their son. They told me the reason they wanted to talk me outside is because they used embryonic stem cells when they treated this son of theirs. It cost like $50,000, but
Jeez.
they had the money, but nobody would help them. So they get their son treated, and on the 747 from Kiev to I think Charles de Gaulle to France, their son, I guess he locked himself in the bathroom, and it took them and the flight attendant to get him to open the door. When he opened the door, and the mother was there, he was in the mirror touching his face, talking in semi-full sentences, saying, "There's spots on my face." They were his freckles.
Wow.
He was a 13-year-old son. And so she's bawling, he's bawling. They're both telling me, we're not proud that we went and used embryonic stem cells, but our son's autism has improved. He's gotten better. He's still better to this day. So they're like, we know stem cells work. We don't know whether they're the type of stem cells that you're talking about, but we know for sure that they work, and we were inspired by your presentation. And why isn't this being used by more people? Well, the stem cells that they got aren't used anymore. We know that we can derive them from afterbirth, like most are. The umbilical and placental cells are good cells. There's one caveat with them, though. They're very, very fragile. They've been there to bring along this baby for 9 months, and then, in nature, they become medical waste or food or whatever it is. I don't know. But the best stem cells are adult stem cells that are derived from fat, adipose material, right? And that's because they have a protection around them. But they're not impervious, but it makes it so they can be frozen at 75 degrees below zero and withstand that for months and months and months in storage or in the lab, and still be viable at the time of being administered, because we either warm them up or have the patients warm up the little vials in their hands until it goes from a solid to a liquid.
Yeah.
And then we either inject them site specifically in their elbow or their shoulder or their knee or their foot for plantar fasciitis, or in their lower back. Or we can do we can ethically and legally administer this product anywhere that fat exists naturally. So you do have fat in your bloodstream. I probably have more than I would like, right? But we have fat in our bloodstream, and so we can get what's called an IV, and you get it in the top of your hand or in the crook of your arm, and then it's called a systemic injection. Okay. And so that basically leaves it up to your body to determine where those cells go. Okay. When we do a site-specific injection, we'll use PRP, which has been traditionally used to heal people all by itself. But we use PRP for a different purpose. We use it almost like a scaffold on a building to keep the cells in that knee or in that shoulder or in that foot, 48, 72 hours longer, so they can do what we need them to do, instead of having them migrate to our lungs and our liver, where we all have lung and liver damage, especially if you live in Utah County or Salt Lake County, right? Or LA, where there's lots of pollution. We all have some sort of lung damage, which is why stem cells naturally want to go to our lungs. And we all have problems with our liver, or because that's the body's filter. That's where the heavy metals and all the poisons hang out, right? And so site specifically, when we treat patients, we want to use PRP to keep those cells there a little bit longer. And then the other thing that we've learned from studies is we've learned that adipose-derived stem cells actually consume PRP. They eat it like Pac-Man. Pac-Man eats the ghosts and gets better and stronger.
Yeah.
Adipose-derived stem cells actually consume and eat PRP, making them it's a force multiplier, making them stronger. So they differentiate faster and last even longer when they eat those plasma-rich platelets. So it's something we've learned over time, which just kind of amazes us. But we're getting better and better at what we do. And this is becoming more and more mainstream. And I think the big thing is, people either think that these stem cells come from aborted babies, or they think that you have to fly down to Panama or Colombia or Mexico to get them. And that was the case. It's no longer the case. You can get the best stem cells in the world, that work the fastest and last the longest in the 801 area code.
Utah, for those who
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, it's true. So from a business perspective, and I'm not shy about being a capitalist. I don't think either one of you are. I don't see red stars on your hats. I believe the best thing you can do for your patients is be successful in your practice, because then you can offer more services, more treatments, more options, and you need more, not less. It's like a pitcher, Mike. You want as many pitches as possible.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have more tools in our so-called tool belt than we've ever had right now, because we can use PRP, we can use peptides, we can use those senolytics, or that zombie dust stuff, to get rid of cells, and all that stuff makes the cells work better, work faster, last longer, and it also makes things cheaper. It does, because then we can buy in bigger amounts. It's like Costco, right? You buy in bigger amounts and then you get a better deal, and that's the case with us too. In fact, we charge $7,000 for 2 million ADSCs. That's our price for those. And for our patients, many of them need more than that. The protocol calls for twice that, about 4 million. We don't charge them $14,000. There's a slight discount as they get more, so they can get twice as many for 12,000. So it's like anything else, that we take a little bit less so we can help them get more, but get it at less.
Yeah.
And then the next chapter that we want to tell you guys about is soon we'll start banking. And so we could take Canyon stem cells. We could take about 2 tablespoons of fat from Canyon, and then we could bank those, and we can pull out ADSCs from Canyon that will work on Mike and Mike's wife and all your siblings, and you can pull them out and use them, and they'll be just as good as these adipose-derived allograft cells, but they'd be autologous cells, so they come from your family. So they would be even more effective than these ADSC cells that are derived from strangers. And we can bank them right here in Utah, where we could help you anytime that you have a problem. And sooner or later, you will have problems. All of us will. And some of us have a predisposition to diabetes. On my family, it's on both sides, right? Can't stay away from sugar, and then we suffer the consequences from that. And that's the way with many families, right? But if you were to bank these cells, we could help with diabetes, we could help with heart disease, we could help with a stroke. What if you had a stroke and your family was able to get you ADSCs while you're in the emergency room and have those administered? The outcome may be far different than it would be if they just gave you anti-inflammatories and a pat on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like an organ donor that's like, you're already compatible, or more compatible even than normal, right?
Yeah, that's true, Mike, but there's no problems with compatibility with the ones that are donated by strangers, if that makes sense. It's just, these are like super cells because they come from the Merrill family, if that makes sense.
Got it. Yeah.
And they're just, it looks like tumblers in a lock. It goes in, it knows exactly what it needs to do. And what you said, donor, is exactly right, because all of these ADSCs have been donated just like an organ. And that's exactly how we treat it, and that's exactly how the FDA sees it. These are donated by donors. It's done the right way. It's said the right way, and then they're administered. But when we start banking this, for example, we have a 19-year-old missionary in North Carolina. When she comes home, we'll get 2 tablespoons of fat from her with liposuction, and then we'll be able to treat our family with those cells probably for 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
Now, if I can back up and tell you, my Alzheimer's dad, we'll probably start him off. We'll start treating him with Dr. Greg Smith. We'll start treating him with the adipose-derived stem cells that were donated from women 18 to 39 years old back in Maryland, where we derived those from. And then the second time he's treated, he'll be treated with cells from our family. So this is nuts and kind of sobering, right? When it's your own family, it's not somebody else. But these things will affect all of us. And if we have those cells on hand, and by the way, it's far less expensive to do it this way. It's a game changer.
Yeah. So Russ, obviously you're big into health, fitness. You're an athlete, you're a competitor. You've got this drive. How did you get involved with stem cells? And I mean, what does that backstory look like briefly?
So that's a great question. Have either of you two been to the Arnold Classic? Have you been to the
I have
Arnold
not.
Classic?
I'd love to go though. Love to go.
So I encourage you guys to go. In fact, that would be an awesome place for a Primal booth. I know the booths are about $5,000 for a small one because we paid for one, and I'm answering your question as we speak.
Okay.
But so the Arnold Classic of Regenerative Medicine is called A4M. Just think of the letter A and number 4 and M as in Mary, right? A4M. There's one in Las Vegas and there's one down in Orlando. That is like the Arnold Classic for regenerative medicine. And so I was there and we had a booth. We had a company called Speaking Empire where we teach providers, nurse practitioners, PAs, doctors how to speak in front of a big group because they usually suck at speaking. Like even if they have something really, really good to present, they somehow find a way to jack it up and then nobody's interested, right? Because that's not what they do. So with Speaking Empire, we taught doctors how to get up in front of a group of 10 or 10,000 people and speak, deliver your payload, and then close the deal at the end. That's what we were there for. We were one of the few that wasn't there to market their stem cells or market their CBD or market something else. We were there to teach doctors how to speak. So I would be in this booth, for 8 hours a day for 3 days. And you get, and even if you love what you do, you get tired of that, right? So I took my 1 hour break instead of going outside and eating food or going somewhere and sitting down and messing around on my cell phone. I decided to go see some of the other booths. And where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So there was one booth that had literally like 50 people around it. I mean, it looked like one of those junior high fights, a big circle, right? So I made my way down to that area where all these people were gathering, and it was the Chimera. It was the Chimera exosome booth, and I didn't even know what exosomes were. I mean, I barely knew what stem cells were, but I went down there and I just kind of acted like a fly on the wall. I was listening to all these conversations and acting like I was reading a pamphlet. I wasn't reading the pamphlet. I was just trying to listen in, trying to figure out why all these people were there. And they were there to talk to a really world famous doctor that knew all about stem cells and regenerative medicine, and then another gentleman that wasn't a doctor that probably knew more than the doctor did. And everybody were kind of loosely listening to these two gentlemen. So I waited it out until that kind of cleared down to like 5 people, and then I went and talked to both individuals, listened to who they were, and I told them who I was and what we offered. I was still trying to sell speaking lessons, right? I think when it got right down to it, I said, I'm interested in stem cells. They're like, why are you interested in stem cells? And I was like, well, because I'm injured. I do that crazy strongman stuff. I carry the heavy stuff on my back and flip the big tires and pull 18-wheelers and fire trucks and stuff like that. And they didn't believe me. I had to go on my phone and show them, because I was about the same size as they are. So they're like, how on it? Anyway, another story for another day. I told them that I was going to attempt a world record in a few months. And so they said, we don't offer stem cells. We offer what are called exosomes. And we think you should get those instead, because at the time they were legal. When the Biden administration came in, with fentanyl coming across the border and killing 100,000 people a year, that wasn't a big enough a problem. So they got rid of benign, helpful exosomes, which only threatened their big pharma pals. And so they got rid of those and made them illegal. But that's another story for when we get to it. But they offered me $30,000 of these exosomes. The next day, if I would sign paperwork and get clearance from my wife, they would inject me with $30,000 of exosomes if I would be willing to share that those exosomes helped me to break the world record.
Wow.
So I signed all the stuff. I got clearance from my wife. And the next day I went up and was injected by a nurse practitioner in a hotel room overlooking Las Vegas. They inject me.
Doesn't seem shady at all.
But you know what, Mike? I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to a hotel room. When I got up there was like 30 people that were signing waivers and being injected. So I felt a little bit better.
Yeah.
But that night I didn't sleep much because I was hitting Google pretty hard, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I knew that these exosomes are what I wanted. I even talked to Travis Ortmeyer about it, and he's like, man, do it, right? So I get these exosomes. Probably about 10 days later, I say to my wife, I say, this is just crap. This is just stupid. It's like saline. It's not even doing anything. And so she hit me with the normal wife stuff. You need to be patient, and it's not going to happen overnight and stuff like that. Literally, like within a day or two, my plantar fasciitis, which doesn't run in my family, I had it in both feet from carrying 800, 900 pounds on my back. It tends to flatten out your feet, right? So the plantar fasciitis in my left foot went away for like a whole day, and then it came back, and then it went away again, and didn't come back. And my wife said maybe it's a placebo effect. The brain's really powerful. Maybe you just think it's going away. And I was like, fair enough. A week later, it was gone, and it didn't return. It has never returned. And I've continued to train. And then it went away and came back and went away and came back in my right foot. And then it was gone on my right foot too. Then my shoulder started feeling better. I had this literally like cascade, like a bathing in anti-inflammatory effects. And I was able to train harder and recover faster than I had in like 10 years. And so I was biting off as much as I could chew, and I broke that world record. I smashed it. Right. And
what was the record?
The record was 950 pounds for 40 to 49.
Jeez.
I carried 950 pounds, 50 feet in St. George at the World Strength Games. And that record still stands. I'm in my 50s now. And so the guys that are 40 to 49, they're going to have to break 950 pounds. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
And
that's on your back, right? That's loaded on your back.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And it's not ego. I mean, if somebody beats that, I'll be the first one out there. I'll hug them so hard I might hurt them. But what I'm saying is, I mean, anybody that breaks that, they're just better. And Mike, you know this, right? If somebody's better, salute them. And
kudos, man. Yeah.
The cool thing about doing cool stuff, whether it's bagging a big bear, which I think is awesome. I love that stuff. Any of that stuff, right? Is that you can do it. You don't just talk about it. You can actually do it. And it's a big deal to people that wouldn't even think about doing that. But I think in an unselfish way, we get a 1,500-pound bear or we break a world record or things like that. If we can inspire other people to get up and not quit and to try regenerative medicine or try, working out again, try taking care of themselves again, then we've done what we're supposed to do as good citizens and brothers and sisters, right? Help each other out. This technology, regenerative medicine, is not only getting better, and we're in a full-on recession, if not a depression, right? And so it's not for everybody right now. It's still not priced where everybody can do this, and it's not covered by insurance. And people that call us all the time from Google ads and other things are like, I'm shocked this isn't covered by insurance. Insurance isn't going to cover this because they're part and parcel and partners with big pharma.
Yeah.
And this isn't conspiracy theories. It has nothing to do with that. They take care of themselves, and they know that we're going to eat badly. They know we're going to be inflamed, and they know that we're going to need knee replacements and back fusions and all of that stuff. But the fact is, we may not need 90% of that stuff if our bodies can fix themselves from within, and we're trying to make that possible. We do consider ourselves pioneers, and we're unabashed. We're not afraid.
Yeah.
And we know from the patients that we have, a little over 20, that they're all getting better and feeling better. We're batting 1,000 so far. We have all positive outcomes. We can't continue to bat 1,000. There's no way that's gonna happen. But it's not just the problem at hand. They're getting benefits that they didn't even count on, like the guy that had arthritis relief who had ulcers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's now stem cells are now becoming pervasive. But if you're going to get them, you might as well pay less, not leave the United States, and get better cells, and that's us. Was that a good enough pitch?
Yeah, it's great. And it's a newer adventure for you. So, I mean, you've been at this for a long time since you got your treatment. This organization and this company that you and your wife, Abby, have built is newly launched, and you've already got, dozens of patients, and you got other people coming, lining up right now. So what's next for your organization, and how do people get in touch with you to get some of this benefit?
So, I think all of us, to one degree or another, we listen to Joe Rogan, right? Red bed therapy, cryotherapy. Mike, you do the cold plunges and all that stuff. Yep. We know that stuff works. We don't have any doubt about it. And it works across the board. It helps people like crazy. So what we're going to do is and we do a little bit of this already, is we're going to do regenerative medicine tourism or medical tourism, where people fly in to St. George, get red bed therapy, do cold plunges, get adipose-derived stem cells, make sure they get peptides, and then, go hike a canyon or go on a helicopter tour of Zion National Park or things like that. So they're down there for a few days getting, a series of treatments, massage therapy, things like that. That's kind of the vision that we have, is where we have not just athletes, but lay people that fly in from all over the world to feel better, and then feel better after it's over. And they have these lifetime memories that they take with them. When we stop inflammation in the body, then the body can focus on other things. And we know we can slow down aging. If we made aging a pie chart, we know that about 40% of it are those zombie cells. Those stupid zombie cells, those stupid senescent cells that get the signal to die, they disobey that, and then they bounce around the body like broken jalopies, and they excrete compounds that give us heart disease and stroke and early aging and diabetes and high blood pressure and things like that. When we can eliminate those, that all by itself changes the game. And then when we mix in exercise and adequate amounts of water and vitamin C and magnesium, red bed therapy, compression therapy, and all of these things, then what people find is they don't need as many of these big pharma drugs. They don't need operations. I mean, you don't get staph infection if you don't go in for an operation. And now we put the train back on the tracks. And even though we benefit from people getting treatments, we would like our patients to never see us again if that's possible. We'll get referrals.
So you talked about migraines. We know about injuries and other muscle tissue that's torn or injured. You talked about cartilage regenerating. What are some of the other common ailments that people have that stem cells could potentially address for them?
So we just treated our first Parkinson's patient.
Okay.
And they've tried everything. They have tried everything. And the tough thing with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, like my dad has, ALS, things like that, is Big Pharma doesn't have much to help them with the way that it's going to go. It's like a plane that's flying in, slowly flying into a mountainside. They just try to make that process a little bit easier. Well, we know we can help with MS, both types of MS. I mean, that's a big statement. Jake Wimpy has MS, by the way, right?
Yep, I didn't know that.
We're going to help Jake. It's going to help, right? And the MS patients, it's not like it used to be where you're screwed if you have MS, right? They literally can help these MS patients. And we know a few ourselves. I'm not going to mention more names, but that's the attack on the sheath, the myelin sheath around the nerves. And there's two types of MS, right? One's probably worse than the other one, where you end up wheelchair bound and it's more aggressive. The lesser is intermittent, it comes on and turns off. What ADSCs do is they help reset the entire autoimmune system and the immune system. And so that's a really big deal. And then as far as really, really treatable ones, Mike, Hashimoto's disease, right? And thyroid problems. We really can help with those type of things. You mentioned migraines. We have two migraine patients right now. One 23-year-old woman. I'm not going to mention her name, HIPAA violation, but she no longer has migraines. She hasn't had one migraine since they went away 6 months ago. And so after her aunt heard about that, she got treated with the same dosage. And her migraines are not gone. She's in her early 50s, but her migraines are gone by about 75-80%, which is worth every penny to her. So we've gotten referrals from both of them. And you see these little clusters. You treat a patient successfully for something. And then I think the biggest thing that I need to tell you, Mike, is I don't believe this is an elixir. It's not a panacea. It's not a catch-all, cure-all. I don't believe that. But we've been able to help every single one of our patients. And sometimes it's more than they expected, and other times it's not quite what they expected. But we do know that our patients that drink adequate amounts of water and get enough sleep and then try to exercise, even if they're hobbled or injured, they do better than the ones that don't do that. Because we have patients that got injected with expensive stem cells to just kind of sit around, like Wall-E, the robot movie, where they just kind of sit around, right? That's never as effective as our patients that try to push it a little bit, because it pushes those cells where they need to go. And like I said before, your body, my body, Canyon's body, they know what to do with these reinforcements once they get them. We want to be able to treat the autism spectrum patients, like I was telling you before. And we're going to be doing that probably through Dr. Greg Smith again, too. So he'll soon have a clinic in Las Vegas. He'll be working with us in St. George. and he's gonna be on our staff in St. George with U.S. Med Spa. That's where our
Wow.
worldwide headquarters is going to be. And then we'll also have Dr. Loeb from Chicago, who's probably the adipose-derived stem cell expert for the world. So that's like literally like adding Vlad Guerrero and Julio Rodriguez to your lineup, right?
Right.
Those are big hitters, really, really big hitters. And it doesn't have to come from me. It doesn't have to come from Abby. It's going to come from our patients, and it's going to come from these world-class doctors. Because the reason we're bold about it, Mike and Canyon, is because we know it works, and we know that people just don't know about this. They just don't know. Now, it is cost prohibitive. Everybody can't afford $7,000 or $12,000 for their loved one. And then we totally understand that. And so, we have payment options and things like that. We even have a referral program where you could send 6 of your friends and potentially get stem cells for yourself for free, if that makes sense. So we do that. We do everything we can. We bend over backwards to help everyone, but we can't help everyone. We just can't. And it's looking pretty good right now, but we just can't help everyone. I'm hoping we can help my 81-year-old dad.
Yeah.
Okay. Who indeed has Alzheimer's. And if anybody in the world can help him, it's Dr. Greg Smith. That'll be the one who will treat my father. But we can't do that here in Sandia. Like I was saying before, we have to do it where he can have that cross the blood-brain barrier, where they know, and Greg knows, that it can help get rid of plaque deposits and stop that whole process, and then save the brain cells, the neurons, from the whole disease process. And so I'm kind of excited about it, but by the same token, I'm keeping my emotional side right in check, because that doesn't help with the business model. It doesn't help with what we're trying to do. We're trying to be realistic about it. Okay.
Yeah.
If we can extend my dad's life where he can live a little bit longer and more comfortably, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
That's all we're really trying to do. But
you talk about it being cost prohibitive.
Oh.
Yeah, you talk about being cost prohibitive, but really, what does it cost to fly to Panama or Mexico or somewhere else, and then the time and then the money, and in a lot of cases, and you can frame that appropriately, but it's a multiple of 2 or 3 or 4 or more to get treatment in some of those places and what you're charging. So from what I know, I mean, set that straight for the audience.
Those places are hard to get into. I want to say this too. I will not badmouth CPI. They have the agreement with Dana White and UFC. That's because they work. That's because those umbilical and placental cells that they get in Mexico, just across the San Diego border, right? They're sourced from local women, and the cells aren't frozen. So if I say something about them that's negative, it's just with self-interest. I look like an idiot, right? I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But the fact is, our cells are better anyway. In fact, I would be willing to say that our cells frozen, and we know that 92+% survive, are better than theirs are fresh, because we know that adipose-derived stem cells, we know this, they differentiate 4 times faster than other cells into cartilage, into blood vessels, into whatever that's needed. That's a big one. And the other thing we know is they produce trillions, with a T, trillions of exosomes for months and months and months. And it's probably those exosomes that are produced that account for the 6 to 8 months of healing. And then it's not over. It just apexes there, it peaks there, and then it still comes down. In fact, my healing effects from September just ended a few months ago. And I got 1 million, which is nothing. So I think what happens is the inclination is to compare dosages, right? You only got 1 million stem cells, and I got 500,000. But right, your 500,000 were as fragile as butterfly wings. Most of them were dead, and it only went down from there. My 1 million that I got became 2 million, 4 million, 16 million, 32 million. They peaked at some point, and while they were peaking, trillions of exosomes were being produced every day. And that's where your body has to take all this stuff and send it where it needs to go. And that's the part that we don't know. We don't know exactly how that works. Nobody does.
Yeah.
We just know that it does. And we also know it's safe. So the only problem, we've never had a problem. The only problem that they've ever had with adipose-derived stem cells, there's been no fatalities, no adverse side effects or anything like that. They've had the same effect as saline would have, with a site-specific irritation And you know what they do for that, Canyon? They give them a 25-cent, 25 milligram pink Benadryl, and everything's good.
Nice.
So there's
Pretty easy.
the only real downside to this is the cost, you know,
Yeah.
and we've got that down as far as we can get it and still have a viable company that's moving forward and growing. If you go to Joe Rogan's people at CPI, you're going to pay $15,000 to $35,000. It's probably worth it.
Yeah.
Or you can go see Dr. Reardon down in Panama, Mel Gibson's guy, who's treated 11,000 patients successfully. 11,000
Wow.
positive outcomes. That's a nice resume, right? And he's one of the best stem cell doctors on planet Earth. Everybody knows that. But you're going to pay, again, $15,000 to $32,000 if you fly down to see Dr. Reardon. That's what you're going to pay if you can get in.
Yeah.
But we can accommodate patients from around the world. We can give them better stem cells, and we feel like we can help them out with all those ancillary things like the peptides and the senolytics, which are all force multipliers. We even can do the PRP with site-specific injections. So it supercharges those ADSCs, because we know that the ADSCs actually eat the plasma-rich platelets for food, and it makes them stronger. How about that?
That's awesome. Two questions for you. So one, is there any use cases where you would need to have multiple treatments with stem cells? And then
Yes.
my second question is, can you use stem cells as a preventative instead of trying to fix a problem that's already happened?
So yes and yes.
Okay.
So let me give you a hypothetical example, okay? Preventative, let's talk about that first, even though that was the tail end of what you said.
It's all good.
So we know that muscle is the longevity organ. So we also know that these have massive, they're vasodilators. So they help the body make more nitric oxide. You guys know all about that as supplement producers, right? But this is on a permanent basis. So vascularity increases permanently. There are even applications with ED where it's not just like acoustic wave therapy where it helps grow a few new blood vessels, but the whole area becomes more vascular. In fact, people get treated often for a knee problem or a foot problem and then have improvements in the ED area. And I'm not going to stay on that, but I'm just going to say circulation is one of the biggest problems as we get older, right? Circulation, right? In fact, they know oxygen basically heals everything. If we can get oxygen around the body, especially to the extremities, right? Then people don't lose limbs and stuff like that, and they get better and feel better. If you're using it while you're working out and you're training and you're eating right, then that's a preventative. It's like a lighthouse built out of bricks, right? It's just it's going to help with everything, and it helps with gut health. That's one of the things that we're trying to do. We know that the stem cells help with gut health, but we also know that the BPC 157 and the AOD 9604, right, and the PEA, that helps with the whole microbiome stuff, which prevents sickness and aging and disease. And we also know that a lot of this stuff administered at the same time can help lengthen telomeres. The senolytics help with the lengthening of telomeres, so it's not making bad copies of bad copies of bad copies, but you're making good copies of good copies of good copies. Some people just age better, right? We don't know everything behind that, but if we can help patients that are 30 to age better, then they don't look their age when they get to their 40s, 50s, and 60s, because they look better inside and out, if that makes sense. And then the second part, what was the first question that you asked?
It was, is there any use cases for getting multiple treatments, or is it just like a one and done?
So that depends from patient to patient. Like I said before, ideally, we'd rather just treat people once because we're just fine, getting those referrals. And if we can treat somebody once and then they don't need us for years or ever again, that's awesome. That's what everybody wants. But to answer your question, we have a mogul skier, world-class mogul skier who's now our business partner. Okay, and that's a cool story all by itself. He was so interested after his outcome that he decided to become our business partner. And so there's more resources there. And then his story is probably the best of all. But his story is a story of multiple treatments. So he was treated the first time with 2 million cells. He had a bad back from thousands and thousands of whoops, right? He was a world-class mogul skier. And his lower back was so bad he couldn't sleep at night. And so that led to him spending about $80,000 of his own money traveling the country, even got the ends of his nerves singed to deaden the pain in his back. And so he had always considered stem cells. And then he heard from a friend of ours, a common friend of ours that's an airline pilot. I have some friends that treat people with what are called fat-derived stem cells right here in the state of Utah. We treat him, Mike and Canyon, and he starts getting these massive anti-inflammatory effects. And so he's able to sleep. He's feeling better. The inflammation, the constant inflammation in his back goes down. And so we treated him again, this time with 4 million cells. And by the way, he was like drugged. He was like drugged. The first day he was just like groggy.
Yeah.
And then that gave way to massive anti-inflammatory effects. And he's feeling better than he's felt in 15 years.
Wow.
So to answer your question, sometimes that there is that. If you have the money to treat yourself with adipose-derived stem cells and it's not cost prohibitive and you don't do it, then you just said no to the first 3 boats and the helicopter that came to your house when the flood came. You gave up on yourself a little bit too early.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our patients so far have only needed 1 treatment. But I will tell you that like autoimmune patients and my dad's not going to have 1 treatment with Alzheimer's. My dad's going to have a first initial treatment. And then, like I said before, he's going to get massive amounts of stem cells from our family through the banking. My dad will probably be treated, 5 times within the next year. Mm. But what we want to do is we want to get the patient to level out. Yeah. In my dad's case, we want, the plaque deposits to stop being laid down, the destruction of neurons in his brain to stop, the holes in his brain to stop.
So Russ, you've mentioned a few more now. So autoimmune diseases. I know I've heard of people going to get, they have cancer. They're getting stem cells to help address that. I don't know, what that attacks specifically when it comes to certain types of cancer, but are there some other ailments that you can list off that are commonly treated with stem cells?
So when we talk about the cancer thing, the first thing that we have to eliminate is that stem cells make cancer stronger. That's a myth. There's no scientific basis behind that. Our bodies have what are called restrictive enzymes. They're the scissors. So when you get the metastasizing cells, there's restrictive enzymes, clip that off and stop that. That's the first thing. The second part of that is that when we get stem cells, if it's on the hierarchy, which it would be for a cancer patient for our body's needs, their body's going to make stronger and better T cells and macrophages to fight cancer, if that makes sense. So if you had cancer, Mike, and I had cancer, and we got, an IV of ADSCs, then it's fair to say that our bodies would make stronger and in larger amounts those macrophages and T cells to fight cancer. So absolutely, positively, yes. In fact, one of the doctors that we work with thinks that within the next few years, we'll be able to, now listen to this, we'll be able to weaponize exosomes and literally put a payload of more or less poison for cancer on the back of these exosomes. The exosomes will go into the fire where the tumors are and the cancer is, literally like destroying the cancer with these exosomes. So they'd have a payload on their back, and we'll be able to eliminate cancer that way. In fact, 3 of the doctors that we work with and one of the scientists we have worked with in the past believe that heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, all these things will be eliminated very, very soon if they're allowed to be eliminated, and that car accidents will become the #1 cause of death in the United States. Sugar's in every police lineup, guys. Sugar's in every police lineup. It may not be the cause of your illness, but there's a good chance that it is. But it's either second or third in that police lineup. It's like usual suspects. Sugar's in the scenario for almost all illness. And then we know for sure, no matter how you got your illness, that sugar will compound it and make it worse.
Yeah.
It's a disaster. It really is. Now we got all these great things like stevia. And I know stevia is not perfect and doesn't taste perfect. We got monk fruit and all these things. We just don't need all of the sugar. And you guys know this. And we counsel our patients to get off or highly reduce the amount of sugar that they're taking, because now you're working on a treadmill, right? You got to give the body a chance. Look at our ancestors waited all summer for the berries and cherries to be on the trees or the bushes, and then they'd eat what they could and probably dried what they could, but then they went 300 days with no sweets. We rarely go a meal without sugar. And it's in everything under, 50 different pseudonames, right? Sugar, sugar, dextrose, sugar. Anytime it ends in ose, you know it's sugar. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll end my rant here pretty soon. But I bet if you took all of our patients, including my dad, that sugar's a big part of it. In fact, they're now calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. It's diabetes of the brain.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and what's amazing is the lack of resistance that you get when you say that. You don't get fact checked on that. That's because diabetes of the brain is Alzheimer's. It's type 3 diabetes.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. We keep trying to come up with all these reasons why we're okay eating sugar. I work out, therefore I can eat pastries every morning and stuff like that, right? It needs to be the exception rather than the rule. It really, really does. I know myself. I've cut my sugar by about 95%, right? But there'll be times when I eat a donut, a chocolate donut, one of those Dunford donuts, or there's a pastry shop in South Jordan. I don't know if you've been there, Schmidt's. They make like European pastries. I think it's on 106. I'm not trying to send you there. I'm just saying.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you make that stuff an exception,
Sure.
right, and then it's right where it needs to be, right? Overwhelms the senses. It's delicious, and then you can do it again in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or something like that. But that's one of the things that all of us need to consider. And maybe if we cut down the sugar and take our primal supplements and work out like we need to, and run and exercise and hydrate like we need to, maybe we won't need stem cells. Maybe we won't need them. You know, where's the ounce of prevention, right? But back to our patients that do indeed need them, again, they're better and they're cheaper. And once we have the machine, they'll be both better and cheaper, because then we'll be able to help entire families who have a predisposition for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or diabetes or heart disease or stroke or things like that. Abby's mom died of a stroke, a hemorrhagic and ischemic stroke, which is a blood clot and a big hemorrhage inside of the brain. She had both, and then languished for 3 years in St. George, right? Which is brutal, and that's probably the worst way to go that I've seen.
Yeah.
You know? But if she would have been treated with adipose-derived stem cells the day of her stroke, that kind of boggles our mind. And it's one of those coulda, woulda, shoulda type things, right?
Yeah. So I guess that leads me, to the performance side of things that you mentioned, that you've been involved with Strongman for a while and you started World Strength Games. So where do you see the World Strength Games going here in the near future? What are your plans with it?
So we'll base our world headquarters out of St. George. We're not gonna move it again. I mean, somebody comes with millions of dollars and says we need you to move to Las Vegas for a year or something like that. I'm not stupid. I mean, we will probably have a suite right next to U.S. Regenerative Medicine, which is kind of the parent U.S. Med Spa in St. George. They'll probably be right next to each other with a conjoining door, because they will run part and parcel to each other. I had someone say to me, and it's off the record, you get all these DMs, right? Somebody said to me, well, you use regenerative medicine as a PED to break records, and you've done it for years, right? So you're not mentioning that. Well, let's mention it, okay? First of all, there's no organization in the world that has outlawed exosomes nor stem cells, nor do they monitor those. I mean, how are they going to monitor those? You've got stem cells in your system,
in our body,
right? Good luck with that, right? Because all of this stuff costs money.
Yeah.
And we don't drug test with the World Strength Games, by the way. We're in show business. So if somebody comes in that spends $10,000 a month to make themselves better and they break the world record, I'm going to pick them up in the air, at least as much as I can at 55, and twirl them around, right? Because we metaphorically want to see Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, and Sammy Sosa and Rafael Palmeiro hammer home runs. We don't care. In fact, nothing has thrilled me more in my strongman career than beating the pants off of guys that had zits on their back in their 30s, which I knew were on steroids. I kicked their butt with nothing in my system. That's awesome. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think the way for me to answer that is this is definitely a performance enhancer. Okay. There's no doubt about that. Okay. So you take away the venom when you admit it. Okay. So it's definitely anabolic. It definitely improves performance. If we cloned you, Canyon, the one on all the stuff that we offer, on all of the peptides we offer, the senolytics that we offer, and ADSCs, would hammer the one that didn't get them and not get injured as much, to answer that question, would last longer and feel better, recover faster. So there you go. It's
Love
definitely anabolic. It definitely helps performance. And Jimmy crack corn, and we don't care.
There we go. Love it. So what, with that being said, you know, you said you're in the show business, right? With World Strength Games. What events or plans do you have in the near future to really put this thing on more of the map? Because there is a huge impression on the strongman community with it. But what are your plans to get this more globally known?
Okay,
I guess.
so the first one is we're working with David Feldman, who's the CEO and founder of Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, right?
Yeah.
His minority owner is Conor McGregor. And we haven't had a casual text conversation with him or IM. We've had 3 phone conversations with him at length, and we'll have our next one next week. He's blocked off a whole hour, which is a lot with David, by the way.
Yeah.
They are the fastest growing spectator sport in the world. Okay. The fastest growing participation sport is pickleball. The fastest growing spectator sport is bare knuckle fighting. It is. Those are facts. Okay. Third is strongman. In fact, in strongman, Royal Albert Hall and all the places in Great Britain, they have 30,000, 25,000 fans, and it's just like UFC. Okay. So where we foresee ourselves is potentially partnering with David, where we have these worldwide regional qualifiers for the World Strength Games. For example, you know, the ones that I mentioned, the Texas Strength Games, the Tennessee Strength Games, the Canadian Strength Games, the Australian Strength Games. The top 3 in every weight class get to go to St. George. You no longer just get an invitation. It's getting harder and harder to go to St. George, which frustrates some people. I'm sorry, but it's going to get harder and harder and harder. We're going to make it like the Sturgis of strongman, where everybody wants to go there. And then we're going to expand outside of the sport of strongman, where we have bodybuilding, fitness, figure, jiu-jitsu, gi and no gi, and slap fighting, arm wrestling, all of that stuff. We foresee an entire fitness weekend.
Yeah.
Where as many athletes and media and support systems and family are getting and learning about stem cells as possible, because again, it runs part and parcel to the World Strength Games. In fact, our scrubs at US Med Spa have the World Strength Games logo, like you see here, on every single sleeve, even those that don't want it on there. Too bad, so sad, right? Because we also are in talks with David to have the bare knuckle fighting challenge athletes all come to St. George or Sandy to get treated like unto the UFC fighters that go down to Tijuana to be treated by CPI.
Wow.
So we're working on that. That'll be a big part of our conversation when we have that in the next few days with him. And again, it's our 4th conversation with him. And he also has carved out a spot for us right now, where September 6th in the Delta Center, where the Utah Jazz play, where they had bare knuckle fighting last September and sold out. We will have at least Travis Ortmeyer and maybe a couple other athletes attempt world records in front of those 20,000 fans, where Travis is going to, at least Travis, will attempt to carry that giant 402-pound Magna Stone that you saw, which I get to move, oh joy, right? I need to upgrade my life insurance.
Yeah, you do.
So we have to go down to St. George and retrieve that 402-pound stone, put it in the back of my 2007 beat-up Dodge Ram, and then bring that up here, where Travis is going to carry that in front of those fans September 6th, both as a preview for the World Strength Games in May, and also to entertain the fans during a 50-minute dead time. And the worst thing in radio and entertainment is dead time. Excuse me. So, yeah, that's in the works. How should I say this? Dana White's already tried to acquire him to try and buy him out. Yeah. And I don't know what the plan is, but obviously he's interested in what we have. St. George is a special place, as you guys know. Unfortunately, the world has discovered St. George, right? Yeah. So there's the mixed blessings that come with that. We won't go into that, but it's a great place to be. Not necessarily a great place to be in May. And you guys were there in April. It was
it's so
usually
hot.
Not as hot as it was in April, right? It was hotter than it usually was. The midday was tough, right?
Yeah.
But now we'll either be in the Dixie Center with 68-degree air conditioning, or we'll be in the Burns Center where Utah Tech plays basketball. Okay. So we don't know which of those it'll be. It'll be one of those. Either way, we'll be indoors where the temperature will be constant. That won't be a concern for us at all. And then we can also build the expo, which is where we'll have booths, like Primal Performance Supplements, where you can be in there and not be sweating your butt off and be able to present what you have with your great products. And that's one of the things is we want to build that expo. We want to build that expo and bring in all the supplement and apparel companies and all that stuff and build that and build that and build that, because that's the magic behind the Arnold Classic, or all the booths in the expo, right? Hundreds and hundreds of booths selling rogue stuff and selling supplements and things like that.
Yeah.
We had a booth, like I was telling you, at the Arnold a few years ago. In fact, it was right next to the Strongman stage. Strongman has become the biggest event at the biggest expo in the entire world. It used to be like an also-ran thing, and they put them back by the loading dock, and now it's 30,000 people, and you can't even get a seat because it's Floor Bjornsson and all these athletes battling it out on a short stage. And because it's a short stage, it's not like World's Strongest Man. They make it heavier and harder because of the constraints of a small space. So it's actually considered the heaviest show in the world, and it's also the highest paying show in the world. It actually pays more than World's Strongest Man. But what we also want to do is we're working on creating a world tour for pros, kind of like the PGA, right? Where like Giants Live, they travel from venue to venue, and then you have people that come to see the pros who also want to compete themselves, or people that don't compete that just want to see a great event. So we'll have all these worldwide regional qualifiers, and we'll have others that have the bare knuckle fighting preliminaries, along with all the regional worldwide qualifiers for strongman. And like I was saying, other sports, fitness, figure, arm wrestling, even slap fighting. You guys like slap fighting?
Love it.
Yeah. I hate being on the wrong end of a good slap, though.
The thing about supplements is supplements are part of that ounce of prevention as opposed to the pound of cure, right?
Yeah.
If we can get people training like they need to, and sleeping and eating and hydrating the way that they need to, then there'll be less of a need for stem cells, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And I get, if you've got money. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Love that. That brings up something. I mean, you mentioned Joe Crucy's name. I got to meet Joe down there. What a strong young lad. I mean, he's awesome. Mike Scott, both of those guys are using our supplements and enjoying the benefits. But how did you spot them? I mean, how do you find talent as somebody who promotes World Strength Games? Because these might be a guy that works the cubicle next to you, or I mean, they're just normal people that just happen to be genetically very strong. Could you tell a little bit about their story, or that kind of story with some of those folks that you've found?
So Michael Scott, he's in his 50s. And the way I've kind of recruited people in the past is I'll like send out like a text or a message that says, what are your best lifts with what's your best result ever with the deadlift? What's your best result ever with farmers, super yoke, log press, things like that. I'll send that out, and then they'll tell me their numbers on all 5 of those. And then there's kind of like a formula. You determine, what's your age, what's your weight, and then you determine, you're in the 90th percentile, you're going to get an invitation. Or now you'll get an invitation to a regional qualifier where you have a chance to be top 3 and move on. It's a little bit tougher, like we were saying. But everybody can improve their performance. Everybody. They've done double-blind studies with men in their 90s who did weight-bearing exercise with like 2.5-pound dumbbells and things like that. They did a heck of a lot better than the 90-plus-year-olds that just walked around with their walker. And the body does what it needs to do, or it disappears, slowly, quickly, whatever it takes. If you're not showing your body that you need to respond to stimuli, then it won't.
So you mentioned Joe. How did you come to meet Joe, and what traits did he have?
I was leaving work, and I think I bought some bad diesel at I won't say. I bought some bad diesel fuel. I think I had some water in it or something, right? Well, I was right there where you cross Highway 6 in Spanish Fork, and my big diesel truck literally like chug stopped in the middle of Highway 6, right? I think it's the most dangerous highway in the United States, or at least close.
Yeah,
like it is like a kill zone. So I'm like in full panic, right? So I the light's like red, luckily for me, but I jump out of the truck and grab the steering wheel and start pushing that truck as hard as I can. It's 7,000 pounds, right? So it's not moving easily, and I'm not steering it very well. And now the light changes and it's green and it's looking bad for me. So I started pushing a little bit harder, and all of a sudden the truck just like lurched forward and it's cruising, and I was able to turn it, not as much as I needed to because it still went up on the lawn by the sidewalk, but it was out of the way more or less.
Mm.
I was like, man, I'm stronger than I thought. And then I look and there's this big 6'3", 300+ pound red-headed guy with a red beard, like a red-headed ginger guardian angel, right?
Yeah.
And I could hardly talk. I mean, it took a minute for me to just be able to talk to him because of what we just went through.
Oxygen.
So I'm like, man, you should do Strongman. And for some reason, he knew what I was talking about, probably social media. So I invited Joe Cruci, the guy that saved my life, to come train with us. And back then in Spanish Fork, we trained on Tuesday nights and Saturday mornings. So I invited him, and he went through the whole learning curve where it sucked, and I had to talk him into coming back the next time because you're sore in the beginning. Your body is like, what in the world are you doing? Well, I preempted that by telling him how sore he was going to be, and that would give way to better sleep and more strength and, better self-esteem and all of that stuff. Anyway, that's true, and that happened. And then I've known Joe for 4 years. He's become one of the best in the world at the yoke. I anticipate him breaking the world yoke record within the next few years. He's already deep into 1100s. He's getting close to 1,200 pounds. The world record is 1,275 pounds. That's a lot of weight. Plus your body weight. Can you imagine that? Every step, you got 1,275 pounds plus your body weight, which is probably over 300 pounds. Imagine the pounds per square inch on that foot. When you go from one foot to the other, imagine that. So he does that. He's one of the best in the world at that, and he also can carry 400+ pounds per hand. Think about that, 800+ pounds in his hands with no straps, and walk 50 feet. So Joe's of that ilk. And then you mentioned Michael Scott. I mean, you're seeing more and more athletes in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. We even have athletes in their 70s, for crying out loud, that realize that it's tough, to carry heavy stuff and to get excited for training 2 or 3 times a week. But they're less sore and they sleep better and their bodies function better than they would if they were just walking or doing geriatric stuff. I mean, you can age gracefully, so to speak, if you squat and deadlift and eat right and sleep right and all of those things. Our ancestors were warriors and farmers and things like that. And my grandpa counseled me not to retire. I mean, on his deathbed, literally grabbed my hand and told me never to retire. And I think what he meant by that was, don't quit. Just keep training, keep working, keep doing things with your body. And a lot of people, they can't wait to get to the finish line and retire, not realizing that when you don't exercise, it's like having a bank account that only does withdrawals. It never does deposits. Well, how long is that going to last? Right. Not very long. We already went through it. You end up in the hospital with a broken hip, a broken femur, something like that, and then you get pneumonia and it's over. And I hate to say that, but like that literally is the way that it goes down for us if we don't do things. You talked about prevention, Canyon.
Yeah.
That's huge. I mean, honestly, if we can get to the point where we can train vigorously and eat the way that we want to and run in the mountains and do those things, Mike, there's less need for hospitals. There's less need for antibiotics. Antibiotics, think about that for a second. Sometimes you need antibiotics to get over an infection, but it wipes out your microbiota. It wipes it right out. Now you got to rebuild that thing. How long does that take to rebuild that thing? Under the best of circumstances, a long time. And now they're saying, with the Uberman lab and other things, you do about as good as your gut does. You do about as good as your gut health. And now these things are coming at us in rapid fire. But I think the best way to answer the question is that Michael Scott and Joe and others are realizing that this is their opportunity to rise above the rest and do incredible things that other people can't even imagine because they don't do it. But I can tell you a little secret here. Everybody can improve. You and I, we could scoop 10 people off the street and have them train with us twice a week and start them off literally by carrying the implements with no weight on them and then adding 2.5s and replacing those with 5s, everybody would improve. If you stick with it, you improve. And so the cool thing about Strongman is it takes a pretty average athlete or pretty average person and turns them into an extraordinary person.
Yeah.
And if you're a good athlete who has that wiring and that fast twitch muscle and that predisposition for athletics, you can become a freaking superstar. It's not like other things where the name on the back of the jersey determines whether you play or not, right? The great thing about Strongman is you could have some stupid last name and be top of the heap as long as you're better than everyone. No one cares. We all want the best guy to win. No one cares what race you are, what religion you are. No one cares about any of that stuff. The cool thing about Strongman is all the camaraderie, and it's a meritocracy where the cream rises to the top every time, all the time. And people just think about how they can improve their game to be that guy who's number one or that gal who's number one, right? It's a meritocracy. That's what I love about Strongman, the camaraderie, and that it's based on merit. It's not based on politics.
Yeah, and
perception.
I was so amazed at how many strong women were there, and world records are broken by women.
Oh, yeah.
There was a gal, I don't know if she was in her 70s or 80s from Australia that
Yeah.
I mean set a world record. I mean it was so inspiring. I mean to watch the
So her name's
crowd behind
Valerie
her.
Silver.
Yes.
Yeah, Valerie Silver from Australia. She flies all over the world on Qantas, and she's 73 years old.
Yes.
And she's always the star of the show. She was in Orlando. She was in St. George. But she's 73 years old and can lift more than a lot of guys in their 40s and 50s. They know that athletes that lift heavy weights, by the way, they know that they don't get as much cancer. It's cut by over 100%.
It's amazing.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, you mentioned a few things there. It's not just extending your life, but having a high quality of life, a rich, experienceful life of not only being with your loved ones longer and having more time and ability to do things physically that a lot of older people historically maybe haven't been able to do, but again, being more healthy and vibrant and you know have vigor in the way that you live your life. And that I think that's what most people I hope most people are after that. I guess there's a percentage that don't care about that. They want to just chill out and relax, and you know they got a different thing going on. But I'm not interested in that. You know, I want to have rich experiences all the way to the end of my days, and I think these kinds of things are tools that we can add to our, you know, arrows to the quiver to help us all experience that, wouldn't you say?
And there's no doubt about it. I mean, you offer high quality protein, right? Let's just talk about that for a second. We know that you need at least 1 gram of high quality protein per pound of body weight per day for the rest of your life, if not a little bit more than that. I tend to lean that way. People have access to all this stuff, but people don't pay attention. I think it was Rush Limbaugh that called them low information voters, right?
Yeah.
Low information voters.
Right.
Well, how many people are low information livers? How many people live their lives with low information? They scroll down and go from quip to quip, from bullet point to bullet point, from scrolling down, but never going anywhere deeper than the waves, right? But one of the things we all need to try to do is live a vigorous lifestyle, because then you get to really enjoy it when you're not in the gym. You get to enjoy it when you're watching fireworks with your kids and you can stand up without assistance.
Yeah.
When you can clean an elk and hunt into your 50s, 60s, and 70s with your grandkids. What's the point of living a long time if you can't do that stuff? And who wants help? You want to live as long as you can without help. As soon as you go into one of those assisted living places, you're not long for this world. As soon as you have tubes hanging out of your nose connected to a tank, you're not going to live much longer. We all know this stuff. So the thought is to put more into the ounce of prevention and less into the pound of cure. But when you're to that pound of cure point, there's no better thing to get than adipose-derived stem cells supported by all the other stuff we talked about. We're now working with CRISPR technology. Do you know about that? You guys know about CRISPR technology?
I've heard a little
No.
bit about it. Maybe share for the audience a little bit about it.
So CRISPR technology, spelled with a K, isn't the CRISPR in your fridge that keeps vegetables nice.
Yep.
CRISPR technology is literally gene editing. Now, this is like that AI stuff where your brain immediately defaults to evil Orwellian stuff, right? Which is a possibility. Of course, the elites are going to want to live forever and take out the bad genes. For example, I'm bald. I could take out that gene and replace it with a benign gene or a gene that's actually positive. Same with like autoimmune diseases, immune diseases, predisposition to plantar fasciitis. We are literally to the point where we can edit genes. And so that combined with telomere lengthening, the zombie cells, reducing or eliminating zombie cells, and then the repair of injuries and chronic disease and treatment with adipose-derived stem cells. We've got all of these tools, guys, now, and the world has to pay attention because it's not hyperbole. It's real. Yeah. It's not stuff we're talking about that's coming. It's stuff that we're doing right now. And so the whole thing is to get the word out. And then how does it apply to us and our families? Is it a coincidence that this came about? Or is it something that we need to all think about? Because again, it's getting better and it's also getting cheaper. It's less expensive. It's more commonplace. Pretty cool. You know, what a lot of people don't realize is in the state of Utah, we can remember the Andy Griffith show. That's a little bit before your time, Canyon. It's like a black and white show with Ron Howard and Andy Griffith, and the doctor would go from place to place and with his leather doctor bag and do house calls, treat people inside of their home. Well, that's coming back. Did you know that? We can actually, in the state of Utah, we can treat patients and have done in their hotel room, in their house, in their business, because we don't need a great big office to do that.
To sum it up, I mean, it's back to that same premise. You know, we're not talking about this miracle drug, so to speak, that's going to just be this one size fits all, you know, bullet pill that's going to fix everything. I mean, that we're talking about supplementation, we're talking about healing, recovery, regeneration, but the base level that, you know, that people need to be aware of is, hey, we need to stay active. We need to stay hydrated. We need to have proper vitamins and a good solid diet. We need to reduce the sugars. And then if we can do that at a baseline and then add some of these other implements and tools to our life, then we can have a much higher quality of life for a lot longer, and we can be more healthy and happy while we're doing it, right?
Oh, yeah. You summed it up really, really well. I think another way to think of it, too, is it's almost like disconnecting and going off the grid, except you go off the medical grid. You go off the big pharma grid, right? Where you know what you need. And you get to the point where I think we all need a coach. I've had coaches in my life. I wouldn't be where I'm at if I didn't have coaches that told me this is good and this over here is BS. It doesn't work, right? We all need someone to help us. And then we begin to think on our own, and almost like raising a child, we begin to do things on our own, make decisions on our own. But when fitness and recovery become part of who you are, not just something you're experimenting with, then people start to notice. If it means enough to you, if fitness means enough to you, if your health means enough to you, you'll find a way to get it done. I always say, if you have the money to get treated and you don't do that, why do you even have money?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What's the point of having money if you don't use it for your health? I mean, what's more important than your health? Is there anything?
Yeah, ask anybody on their deathbed.
It's interesting. You hear like, would you rather? So if I gave you $10 million, that'd be awesome, right? So what if I gave you that, but tomorrow you die? Everybody says no, of course not, right?
Yeah.
Life's more important, and I think it's important, and it's cheaper, more cost effective to prevent than it is to fix once you're already passed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That being said, we have the ability now to help people that have been negligent, literally like really, really stuck it to their bodies. We have an opportunity to give them a second and third chance.
Yeah.
You know,
there are people that have genetic issues or things that are outside of their control or environmental.
That's right.
That maybe they didn't, you know, necessarily make a lot of bad choices. They were dealt a little bit of a raw hand, and you got a chance to swap some cards out and give them a joker that's wild, right?
Yeah, and we're seeing that. We really, really are. In fact, the patient that we treated for Parkinson's, right? He's sleeping better. He's trembling less and all these things. And he's had massive anti-inflammatory effects. The guy can't sleep. Okay.
Mm.
He just can't sleep. So he's been able to sleep, and we're less than 2 weeks out. Do you see what I'm saying? And we were honest with him. We told him, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and ALS, these are the outlying monsters. These are the ones that we really, really have to wrestle with. But we're not trying to cure you of Parkinson's. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to lengthen your life, and like you said, Mike, increase your quality of life. So those two lines run parallel. And his family members that are there and supporting him, that's all they want. They want him to live a little bit longer and maybe die from something else. You know what I mean? I mean, we're all on borrowed time, right?
Yeah.
Let's borrow a little bit more time, and then here's the big one. Let's die later. Let's die later. We're going to die. Let's die later.
And do some of those things that we couldn't do if we didn't, right? Well, this has been super insightful and amazing. I'm sure that a lot of listeners are going to gain a lot of new information, new wisdom that they maybe hadn't heard before. So I encourage you to check out Russ and his company. Russ, where can they find you and learn more about the stem cells and also World Strength Games?
So it's US Med Spa, MED, SPA, usmedspa.co, like company, usmedspa.co. And then it's worldstrength.games, worldstrength.games. So those are the two. Those are our twin brands, right? And they definitely help each other, but you do not have to be a world-class athlete to get world-class treatment and results.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, this has been a lot of fun, and we're excited for our partnership with your organizations, and we're excited to bring this to our listeners, and hopefully we can not only provide value to them and their loved ones, but also help improve the lives that they're living and give them more of those experiences that they seek like we all do. So thanks again for joining us today, Russ.
You guys are fantastic, and I believe in what you're doing.
Awesome. Hey, we appreciate it, Russ.
Thanks, fellas.